Coming out into your garden early in the year when you still have some snow and some not snow, and looking at your garden and seeing where the snow is and where the snow is not, to understand where the warmer spots. Hey, it's Greg here with maritimegardening.com, and it's the beginning of March, and it's not spring yet, but you know, you're starting to get that feeling. It's almost spring, and I'm seeing some signs of some things. I saw some blue jays on my backyard a couple days ago. Blue jays aren't a sign of spring necessarily because they can overwinter. But I also saw something last night that is a telltale sign that things are beginning to happen. I saw a porcupine on my front yard eating something out of my lawn. Some weed, you know, it's probably not grass, but there's something green that porcupine thought was worth coming out into the open to eat. The beginning of everything for me is often, I mean, we think of the robin, right? The red-breasted robin as a sign of spring. There's other things we think of as signs of spring, like the spring peepers. That's a ways off for here. Usually not till like the end of May where I live. You know, or it's not end of May, sorry. End of April, beginning of May, usually is when the spring peepers start here. But the porcupine foraging on my yard is usually a sign of something, right? There's enough sun and enough, you know, something's happening. That porcupine's eating something on the lawn, so spring is beginning. And so you're starting to think about your garden and planting things, and you're getting into that mode, right? And I thought I'd share with you something that I may have shown in a previous video, but I've gained a lot of viewers in the last year. So I thought if I've done another video on this, I apologize, but unless you've gone back and like watched every video I've ever made, and I've got like 500 videos, so maybe you're not going to, you know, have the diligence to do that, and I can forgive that. There's a lot of videos to watch. But coming out into your garden in March, and I'm speaking from a person living in Nova Scotia, Canada. It's zone 6, zone 6A, I believe, where I am. But I mean, it's different for everyone. The zones don't tell you everything about your seasons, but to some extent they do. So, you know, I'm using that as a reference point, zone 6A. But coming out into your garden early in the year when you still have some snow and some not snow, and looking at your garden and seeing where the snow is and where the snow is not, to understand where the warmer parts of your garden are and where the warmer parts of your garden aren't, to make decisions about where you're going to plant certain kinds of things. Because the heat-loving, sun-loving, you know, the plants that need a lot of sun and warm soil. There's sunlight, but there's also warm soil. Your plants that really like a lot of heat, they need both. They need sunlight, but they also need warm soil. So this time of year, March, if it's the case that things are melting, you can see behind me, there's like places where there's snow, and there's places, I can't see the camera right now, but there's places where there are snow, and there are places where there aren't snow. So reading the melt out of things, and of course we could get it's only the beginning of March, we could get another huge snowstorm and everything could get covered in snow. Who knows what's going to happen? It doesn't really matter. When you're observing thaw in your garden, the ground's becoming bare and things like that, and it's mid-thaw, so everything hasn't thawed. There's still some snow, there's still some ice, but there's some places that aren't thawed. That's when you look at your garden and you make decisions, or at least you register in your mind where the hot spots are and where the cold spots are. So I'm going to take you around the garden here today and show you where there's still snow and explain why there's still snow, and explain my thought process in understanding that those are not the places where you're going to try to grow your tomatoes, your squash, your eggplant, your peppers, things like that. It's just pointless to try to grow them in those places because it's going to take so long, A, for the soil to thaw out and get warm, but also in early spring when, you know, the sun's still not, you know, prior to the spring equinox. The spring equinox is when the sun rises due east, which is, for me, this way. Prior to the spring equinox, the sun rises southeast to some extent, right? It's not, you know, in the dead of winter, the sun rises in the southeast. It sets in the southwest that way, right? And when you're in the spring equinox, the sun rises due east, sets due west this way. And there's a hill over here, right? And as you get towards the summer solstice, the sun actually starts rising like northeast and sets northwest. That's when you're getting your most sun. But understanding all of that and where the shade is in your garden and where that really matters, even if you're not in a northern place. I mean, for a northern gardener like me, it's important to understand where those places are, because you know you can't plant your things that like warm soil and lots of sun. It's just pointless to plant them there. But if you're even in a southern place, understanding where your cold spots are matters, because if you're trying to grow something that doesn't like too much sun, like lettuce, that might be the place you want to plant your lettuce. For me, that's the place where I'm going to plant my lettuce, because there's other things I want to plant that need sun. So the sun places where I am are of a premium, because most things want a lot of sun, but there's some things that can't take too much sun, or they'll be prone to bolting or that sort of thing. So come with me. I'm going to show you around the garden here a little bit and show you some places where I can tell those aren't the best spots for the heat-loving plants. So here I am at the entrance of my garden, if you've watched any of my garden tours. And right now I'm facing due east. That's east. Which means that over here is south, right? This is the south end of the garden. Which means that it's in the sun tends to be over here this time of year, right? We're still in March. But that means the sun's over here, which means that this part of the garden is in shade for a certain part of when the sun's up, right? During the day, right? The sun rises over there in the southeast this time of year and sets over here in the southwest to some extent, right? Eventually, you know, as we get to the spring equinox, it'll rise right over here and set over there. But look at this. I can see no snow, or some snow, no snow. And as we go towards the south end of the garden, which is in the lee, right, or in the shade of these trees and things, right? There's all this stuff here, right? Trees, leaves, and so on and so forth. I don't want to mow down the whole forest, right? But we're facing south here. This is where the sun's coming from, and there's shade. So everything here still has snow. Snow, snow, snow. So I know that these are going to be the last beds to warm up. These soil here is going to be the last soil to thaw. And this is going to be the last place where I get good sun, because early in spring, this, you know, that end of the garden is important, right, to understand that. So I know this is not a place for any part of the gardening season, because it's going to be so late for this soil to warm up, right? The sun isn't going to start shining on this until the spring equinox. It's going to start rising over there, and it'll actually get, you know, decent sun over here. But that's not going to happen until the spring equinox, you know, sometime in, I don't know when that is, April, right? April-ish, right? So this is going to be behind the other parts of my garden. Look over here where it's just a little bit of a barrier, right? But this is, think about the angle of the sun and all these trees over here, right? So these beds get good sun. They're not in the shade in terms of relative to south. These beds get good sun. Now, I mean, these beds get to cheat a little bit because they're bordered with rocks, and the rocks gather a lot of heat. So, I mean, the rocks, these are the first ones to generally melt out and for the snow to disappear. And of course, having these sand pathways gather sun, because sand is rocks and rocks gather sun. Now look at this snow here. Why is there snow here? That's south over there. Why is there snow here? Well, if we look to the left, now we're facing west. There's a hill here. Not a huge hill, but it's a hill, and it casts shade, right? So we've got a bit of snow here on the side of the hill. And there's a bit of snow over there on the side. Not a lot, but some. You can see there's the snow, and then there's the beds where there's no snow, right? So I know that this spot over here is a bit cool, doesn't get as much sun. I know that this bed doesn't get ideal sun. We come around the corner here, now we're starting, these beds, this bed right here is facing, this bed's facing this way, due south. It's completely thawed out, except for a little bit of snow. And I mean, there's drifting as well, so you have to understand, you know, is there snow there because there isn't enough sun, or is there snow there because there's drifting? Snow gathers here because it gathers around the fence and so on. And up here where I've created this terraced bed on the south-facing slope, there's no snow at all. That's melted, right? Now it's a windy spot and it's kind of exposed, but it's also south-facing, so there's no snow. The whole hill has no, so there's a little bit of snow right there, but there's trees up there, right? Casting some shade and not letting as much sun on the ground to thaw it, right? So that's the point. That's the point of this video, to just explain to you that you need to understand what you're working with, right? These beds, I can plant carrots, potatoes, lettuce, spinach. I can plant things like that over here. They're going to grow. It might even be a good place to grow those things to keep them from bolting, because they're not going to get as intense sun, right? The more sun lettuce and spinach in particular get, the more they're prone to bolting, right? But I'm not going to try to grow any sort of tomato or squash or pepper or eggplant, anything like that over here. It's just not going to work, right? I mean, I'd have to do, I'd have to have domes like this. I'd have to do a lot of things to amplify whatever kind of sun energy is affecting the ground here, right? But why? Why bother when I've got these other options, right? I've got all these other beds. So I know that all of these beds right here are good beds for heat-loving plants. I know that all of these beds are good beds for heat-loving plants, right? I know that as I go over here, everything over here is fine. I can pretty much plant whatever I want over here. What I need to understand is that this bed right here, I can't just plant anything I want here. There's still snow here. It hasn't thawed out. It's kind of facing east. There's this big, I know that when the sun, at the spring equinox and the sun's setting over there, this isn't going to get some of that afternoon sun. So there's things I can't plant here. I wouldn't waste my time trying to plant tomatoes or peppers or anything heat-loving, or corn. That's another one. Corn needs a lot of sun. Last year I planted corn in this bed right here. Worked out great. No snow here. This is a good bed for heat, right? And it's got those rocks bordering it, which gather heat too. But I can't, it's just not worth my time to plant those things here. I need to plant other things here. I plant potatoes here. You know, beans like heat, but they grow fast. So beans, you know, like if you're going to try to plant, this would not be a place I'd plant something that needs 100 days to mature, right? But a fast-growing bush bean will grow here. Potatoes will grow here. Carrots, parsnips, you know, any sort of green will be fine here, right? If I had to make that decision. But as we go over here, right, I know that I've got sunny spot. There's no snow at all here. There's no snow, there's no ice. This is the heat spot. This little corner here, this little bed here, right, where I can't remember what I planted here last year, beans. They didn't do that well. You know, I got beans and I got production, but it wasn't like a bumper crop. But I can understand that a little bit more now, because I know that it's because it's, you know, in the shade of this hill at the spring equinox, that this is not a super sunny, warm place. So whatever I plant here, I have to understand that it's not getting the best it can get. Remember, every plant, the plants need sunlight, right? Some plants can get by with less than others, but all plants need sun. So anything I plant here, I have to understand that this is not an ideal spot to grow just anything. And even despite the fact of having all these rocks and their ability to gather and hold heat, it's still limited because it's in the shade of this hill. So just some considerations, things for you to think about with your gardening space when you're planning out your garden and deciding where things are going to go, where you're going to plant certain things. Understand that, you know, depending on the different things, different structures that surround your garden, someone else's house, a shed, a tree, usually trees, but it could be anything. It could be a fence, could be all kinds. There's all kinds of things that can cast shade in your garden. It's worth your while coming out this time of year where some things are thawed and some things are still frozen, And I mean, this is different for everybody. So, you know, this might not make sense in March where you are. This might make more sense in April because there's less snow then, right? But when things are half thawed and there's half snow in your garden, take a look at where the snow is and take a look at where the snow isn't. Then you know what those beds can do. What, you know, then you're in a better position to make decisions about where to plant things. Don't try to get a plant that has certain needs to grow in a place where those needs are not going to be met. The plant's just not going to be happy. It'll grow, but it's probably not going to achieve its full potential. So to whatever extent is possible, and depending on, you know, how many beds and how many options you have to work with, reserve those places that aren't the hottest places in your garden for other things that don't need all that sun. So anyway, just some I was out here today just having a look around, getting the feeling, you know, it's almost, you know, spring's just around the corner. You know, it's still quite cold outside. I think it's -7 Celsius today. But yeah, just thinking about it, and you know, it's good to start planning out your garden and deciding where things are going to go, and deciding where certain things just can't go, because you're going to get better results like that. You know, you're going to understand the limitations of the space you're working with, and you're going to put plants where they have the best chance of having success. And the beds that are just not ideally positioned relative to sunlight and shade and that sort of thing, you plant things there that will work with that space. So anyway, I hope you found that interesting. If you did, please like, share, subscribe. Check out my podcast, maritimegardening.com. Click the bell if you want to be notified when I make a new video. And until next time, get out there, get at it, have fun in your garden. Thanks for watching.